The policy and procedures for addressing harassment in the church states the church's position on harassment and outlines the procedures to address allegations of harassment when they arise within the Presbyterian Church in Canada. This video is made possible through the generous gifts given to Presbyterian Sharing. As part of the Church's ongoing commitment to truth, healing and reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, we acknowledge the lands where we live, work, and worship in the place now called Canada. We acknowledge the land's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived, and continue to live, upon it and whose practices and spiritual ties were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the lands and its other inhabitants today. And we acknowledge that many of these lands are subject to treaties and agreements outlining how lands and resources should be shared, while other land is unceded. We also acknowledge the Church's history and the harmful and deadly impacts that colonization has had by displacing Indigenous societies, cultures, languages, spirituality, legal and economic systems, and family structures. With God's guidance, the Church seeks new ways to walk with Indigenous peoples and to find healing and wholeness together. This policy focuses on the Church's life, on the people who lead and serve, both paid and volunteer, on the people who are served by the Church, and on the Church's activities and ministries. The policy applies to everyone who participates in the worship life and activities of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. The policy of the Presbyterian Church in Canada is that harassment of any kind shall not be tolerated and will be addressed. This seminar is designed to help you understand the Church's position on harassment and expectations of behavior you conduct in church as well as the conduct of others towards you. You will also learn how to respond if you experience harassment within the Church's activities. In addition, this seminar will help church employees and employers to understand their specific responsibilities arising from this policy. At the end of the seminar, you will be asked to test your understanding of the harassment policy. The foundations of the policy are its theological basis and guiding principles. The Presbyterian Church in Canada understands that its life should be characterized by the highest expression of Christian fellowship, as taught by Christ in the New Testament epistles. Christ intends the Church to be a safe place to exercise, share, and receive ministry. However, when our lives do not reflect God's love, harassment can take place in the congregations, courts, and committees of the Church. Responding to harassment, promptly, carefully, and appropriately, helps the Church become the welcoming community Christ calls it to be. All complaints of harassment will be received, investigated, and acted on as specified in this policy. The person complained against is always presumed innocent until proven guilty. Allegations of harassment of a sexual nature will be addressed using the policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment. No retaliation is permitted against a person who makes a complaint in good faith. Persons making a complaint of harassment retain the right to apply to a human rights tribunal or to pursue other available legal avenues. The Church is called to implement this policy in the spirit of prayerfulness, love, affection, and humility, under the continual illumination of the Holy Spirit. The policy defines and describes different types of harassing behavior. Harassment means physical or verbal behaviors that are directed against a member, adherent, volunteer, or employee of the Church that are unwelcome or should be known to be unwelcome. Harassment occurs when someone makes unwelcome remarks or jokes about a person, threatens or intimidates a person, or makes unwelcome physical contact with a person. Harassment is usually behavior that persists over time. However, serious one-time incidents can also create a poisoned environment and be considered harassment. Bullying is the use of force, coercion, hurtful teasing, or threat by one person to abuse, dominate aggressively, or intimidate another person. Bullying requires a perceived imbalance of physical or social power the bully has, or is perceived to have more power than the victim. Bullying takes different forms. Physical bullying uses physical force or aggression against others, for instance, by hitting. Verbal bullying uses words to hurt others, for instance, by name-calling. Social or relational bullying seeks to intimidate or harm others by excluding them, spreading rumors, or ignoring them. Cyberbullying uses electronic media to threaten, embarrass, intimidate, or exclude others, including seeking to damage their reputation. The Church's policy uses the word harassment to encompass both harassment and bullying. Discrimination is an action or a decision that treats a person or a group badly for reasons such as their race, sex, age, or ability. Human rights codes in Canada identify personal characteristics that are protected from discrimination. This list includes race, religion, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, and ability. These personal characteristics are protected against discrimination. They are referred to as prohibited grounds of discrimination. The human rights codes protect people from discrimination on one or more grounds in 5 parts of society, called social areas. Employment is one of the protected social areas. The word workplace refers to any location, permanent or temporary, where an employee performs any work-related duty. Employers have the responsibility of providing employees with a workplace that is free of harassment. Conduct is considered workplace harassment if it creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment, or if it interferes with the employee's work performance. Supervision of workers and the workplace is permitted. Employers or supervisors are permitted to take reasonable actions to manage and direct workers and the workplace. Examples of reasonable actions include constructive criticism of an employee, evaluating or monitoring an employee's performance, setting performance standards, and correction or discipline of an employee. Such reasonable actions are not workplace harassment. Racial harassment is unwanted or unwelcome oral, written, or physical conduct related to a person's race, culture, nationality, or ethnicity. This policy is used to address complaints of racial harassment. Sexual harassment involves unwelcome comments or conduct of a sexual nature, including repeated sexual remarks or physical contact that is degrading. Sexual advances by a person in a position to confer, grant or deny a benefit to another, and/or threat by a person in authority against a person who has rejected a sexual advance from the person in authority. The policy for dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment is used whenever alleged harassment includes behavior of a sexual nature, such as improper or unwelcome comments, or conduct pertaining to sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. The policy and procedures for addressing harassment in the church is not used for complaints of sexual harassment. Making a complaint is not always the immediate response to an experience of harassment. Sometimes, other considerations take precedence. When violence is experienced or witnessed, the correct immediate response is to call 911. First, ensure everyone is safe and medical care has been provided. A person who alleges harassment is free to contact police. Church procedures are suspended during police investigation. A person who believes they have been the victim of harassment may feel reasonably confident that resolution can be achieved through direct conversation with the alleged harasser. Such direct conversation should be attempted only at the request of the alleged victim. Both parties must have a support person present. In some situations, direct conversation is not safe or practical. Neither party should be pressured to participate. Complainants retain the right to apply to a human rights tribunal or to pursue any available legal avenues. Next is the overview of complaint process. The complainant is the person making the complaint about being a victim of harassment. The respondent is the person alleged to have engaged in harassment of the complainant. The respondent may also be referred to as the alleged harasser or alleged offender. The complaint sets out the details of the alleged harassment. The complaint is written where possible. Oral complaints are also permitted. Which church body addresses the complaint? It depends on the position in the church of the respondent. Responsibility for addressing the complaint rests with the church body to whom the respondent is accountable. This rule applies regardless of the church context in which the harassing behavior is alleged to have occurred. Allegations about the conduct of a minister are addressed by the minister's presbytery. Allegations about the conduct of a congregational member, adherent, or office bearer are addressed by the congregation session. Allegations about the conduct of a lay church employee are addressed by the governing body of the church employer or by its designate. The exception is when allegations about the conduct of a member, adherent, or office bearer of a congregation are made by a minister of the congregation. In this case, the complaint is addressed by the minister's presbytery. Complaints are presented to the clerk or moderator of the church court that addresses the complaint or to the supervisor of the church employee. The complaint process involves the following tasks: 1. Receiving the complaint. 2. Investigating the complaint. 3. Deciding whether harassment has occurred. 4. Deciding on corrective action or discipline when harassment is found to have occurred. 5. Communicating the results of the complaint process. And 6. Keeping records of the proceedings. Next is the procedures for addressing allegations. The complaint should contain the following information: the complainant's name and contact information, the respondent's name, position within the church and contact information, the witness name and contact information, a description of situations or incidents, including dates, times, frequency, locations, any supporting documents, and a list of documents in possession of a witness or the respondent. The makeup of the investigating committee is as follows. The committee has up to 3 members, at least one is a member of the court of jurisdiction. The alleged harasser is not a member of the committee. The alleged harasser does not supervise directly any member of the committee. Committee members are able to be objective about the individuals and the information they will consider while investigating the complaint. Committee members are familiar with this policy and may have received training in its use. The investigating committee begins its work promptly. Since cases vary in complexity, some investigations may be completed within a few days, while others may require more time. Every effort should be made to conduct the investigation and complete the report within 30 days. Steps should be taken to ensure the safety and comfort of the complainant. This could involve imposing the requirement that no contact occurs between the complainant and the respondent during the investigation. If further offense is considered a risk, the respondent may be removed from the court, event, or temporarily suspended, with pay, from employment. It should be made clear that any such restrictions are understood to be on a without prejudice basis. This means that there is no assumption that the respondent has committed the alleged harassing behavior. Pastoral care is to be made available to the complainant and the respondent. The investigating committee makes sure that each party has or knows how to access any pastoral support they might want. No member of the investigating committee is permitted to serve as pastoral caregiver to the complainant or to the respondent. The investigating committee may explain the church's complaint procedures to the complainant and to the respondent as it meets with them. The investigating committee makes sure that each party knows how to access any additional help if desired. When a respondent is suspended temporarily from employment, the church employer needs to be provided with appropriate information in a timely manner. The investigation will be handled in a confidential manner. Disclosure of information will occur only when it is necessary to investigate, to take corrective action, or as required by law. The information gathered by the committee is assessed according to a balance of probabilities. What would a reasonable person believe took place? How credible are the different versions of events? The investigation involves a series of interviews, during which the committee collects information from the perspectives of the complainant, the respondent, and any witnesses. The committee then meets separately with each person interviewed. Any documents provided by those individuals are collected and reviewed. Interview notes are to be taken. The end product of the committee's work is its report to the church body addressing the complaint. The committee summarizes its work and the information collected. With its recommendations, the committee provides its assessment of the complaint and of any corrective action or discipline for the respondent. The church body addressing the complaint meets privately to receive and consider the report of the investigating committee. All decisions about the complaint require a majority vote by the members of the church body who attend the meeting. The church body decides whether the complaint has been substantiated, choosing between 2 outcomes. 1. The complaint has been substantiated on a balance of probabilities. Or, 2. The complaint has not been substantiated on a balance of probabilities. If the complaint is deemed to be substantiated, the church body moves to considerations of corrective action or discipline. If the complaint is deemed to be not substantiated, the complaint is dismissed. When the complaint has been substantiated, the church body decides what corrective action or discipline for the respondent will be imposed. The person found to have engaged in harassment is disciplined appropriately. Corrective action or discipline must be reasonable and proportionate to the harassment that has been found to have occurred. Corrective action or discipline may include any necessary steps to prevent a recurrence. For church employees, corrective action or discipline may include a suspension without pay or dismissal from employment, the requirement to offer an apology, agreement to take training, an oral or written covenant outlining future behavior, or another remedy. For other members or adherents, the options are similar to those for employees, with the exception that suspension or termination applies to the roles the respondent has been undertaking as a volunteer. Both the complainant and the respondent are informed of the decisions made by the church body about the complaint and any corrective action or discipline to be imposed on the respondent. The church body addressing the complaint will offer a means to resolve the matter in a manner that is acceptable to both the complainant and the respondent, if possible. Both the complainant and the respondent have the right to initiate a disciplinary case if they are unsatisfied with the results of the investigation and any corrective action or discipline imposed on the respondent. The Book of Forms outlines these steps. Records of all complaints of harassment will be kept by the court of jurisdiction or by the employer in a secure, locked location. The list of records to be included is outlined in the policy document. All records remain confidential. Disclosure is permitted only as necessary for investigation, for corrective action, or as required by law. All records are kept for 2 years from the conclusion of the investigation, or longer if the court requires. Both employers and employees have responsibilities pertaining to harassment. Church employers must ensure their employees understand the church's position on harassment and expectations of behavior. Employers must ensure their employees know how to respond if they experience harassment. Church employers should teach their congregations about harassment by affirming the church's zero tolerance for harassment. Affirming the church's commitment to address all complaints of harassment and fostering awareness and understanding of the church's procedures to address harassment. These conversations can help to create a safe environment where harassment is not experienced. All employees have the right to a safe and professional workplace. All employees must act professionally and contribute to the church being a safe place for all. This applies to their conduct at all times and places where they perform any work-related duty. The different human rights codes in Canada include different lists of prohibited grounds of discrimination. Also, the definition of harassment may vary across jurisdictions. Therefore, individuals are encouraged to review the legislation that applies in their jurisdiction. The Church's support for this policy includes providing advice and training for investigating committees when requested, protecting people who make complaints in good faith, considering discipline for malicious complaints, reviewing the policy, and training for employees and volunteers. Members of the investigating committee are permitted to contact national office staff for advice and some training. Such requests are not required. The Church will not tolerate retaliation against anyone for making a complaint of harassment in good faith, for reporting suspected discrimination or harassment, or for cooperating in an investigation. Regardless of whether harassment is found to have occurred, such retaliation is a violation of this policy. Anyone who makes a malicious complaint of harassment may be subject to disciplinary action. This policy will be read at least annually by sessions, ministry boards, presbyteries, synods, camps, colleges, and standing committees. The Life and Mission Agency will conduct a review at least every 3 years to ensure the policy continues to comply with applicable legislation. All employees and volunteers of the Church are to receive training on the contents of this policy. If you are required to confirm that you have completed the basic training in the policy and procedures for addressing harassment in the Church, return to the Safety Policy page and follow the steps to complete the review of knowledge.